Okay, so now I hope you enjoyed your break. We're gonna jump right into Endpapers. I also wanna give you guys a little heads up, another way to perm, and I totally forgot this. You can double up rods, so you can take 2 of these and wrap them so the hair has a huge bulge and you'll get more volume. You can also take 2 perm rods and make an oval shape, and that creates a really nice wave. In your Studio Luma episode, I think it's like the fashion perm or something, it's a really fun episode, they do that and it comes out looking amazing. So watch your Studio Luma, it'll tell you a lot of information on perms. Your end papers are also called end wraps, and they're absorbent papers used to control the ends of the hair when wrapping and winding the hair on the perm rod. End papers should extend beyond the ends of the hair to keep them smooth and straight and prevent fish hooks or where the hair is bent up, and that if you don't have the end papers, the ends don't have room to swell, and what happens is you get a very limp curl because the ends are fried out. They also help with the porosity issue. So you do need end papers in your perming. You can, let's say you live in a country, because I had someone write me this, where they live in a country, they don't have end papers, and you can't order them online. What you can do is, if you have tissue paper, carefully cut out the tissue paper, and that will fill in for end papers. It works identical. Or parchment paper, that might work too. There are different ways to wrap the hair. Typically you want to give the hair the most room, and that's why I always recommend always wrapping with a double flat wrap. Your double flat wrap is where you have one paper over and under and hair is sandwiched in between, and you roll up with that. The reason this is really good is it gives the hair the most control, and it helps keep the ends evenly distributed, so you're able to let the hair swell appropriately. You're giving the hair a lot of integrity, as opposed to the single flat wrap where you're just putting one paper over the hair and then trying to wrap it around. Be very careful if you're doing that. And the bookend wrap, which be very careful when using that. That's typically used on thinner hair, hair that's around the sides of the head. This is when you use one end paper folded in half over the hair like an envelope. The bookend wrap eliminates excess paper, and it can be used with shorter rods in very short lengths of hair. When using this wrap method, be careful to distribute the hair evenly over the entire length of the rod. You want to avoid bunching the hair up in the paper, because if you bunch that paper up, you're going to crimp it, and you're also going to cause a permanent crimp in the hair, and it'll produce an uneven curl. You also want to keep the hair evenly damp, because typically you're going to be wet wrapping the hair, which means that you are water wrapping, where you shampoo the hair first, condition if you need to. You're going to wrap the hair up while it's damp, and then perm like that. What happens when you are water wrapping is it allows the solution to penetrate better. The old school method is called lotion wrapping, and lotion wrapping is you're spraying the solution on and wrapping it. Some true acid waves will allow you to lotion wrap because it doesn't activate, because it's so close to our natural pH that we have to heat it up with the dryer. So you may be able to lotion wrap with certain solutions, or if after you wrap the hair is very resistant and it's in a good length, you're able to saturate fully. So also note too, short hair, here's something I want to add in here. They don't really talk about it in the book, but typically everyone asks 2 things. Do you want to perm the hair first and then cut it, or do you want to cut the hair first and then perm it? Typically, you can trim the hair 90 degrees so everything's even, and then wrap it if it's easier. Don't do a full-on haircut if you are doing a perm, because then it's going to be harder to wrap the hair, especially on older women that have shorter hair and they come in. I had a client where every student would get tough. She'd be tough with every student. And when I was there, what I would say is like, look, we would try to very respectfully explain, we're not going to give you a full-on haircut because you have short hair. We got to wrap the hair. If we can't wrap the hair properly, you're not going to get a good perm. So after she kept talking and being really rude, I spun around and said, okay, look, what I'm understanding is I'm telling you as a professional what we need to do, and you're telling me something different. What I can do is, if we can't agree, I can find you a stylist at another salon that will accommodate your needs. And that's, when you get tough and they're able to understand that, like, look, you have to do what I'm telling you. You'll still get what you want, but we're going to do it my way first, which is professional way. That's how you have to be at certain times if they're not getting it. The worst thing you want to do is, do what they want if they're guiding you instead of you guiding them, and you cut their hair really short and you can't wrap these rods, and what happens is they get crimped ends and their hair looks like a frizzed mess. Then they won't come back to you. So that is the first issue. The second issue is, should you color and then perm? And this really depends. Different stylists have different theory on this. My own theory is this: you want everything the same porosity, so typically color or bleach the hair first and then choose the appropriate perm, because everything is the appropriate pH and you're able to perm the hair appropriately, so there is no surprises with this, the root or the regrowth taking too long, and then by that time the ends are fried, so you'll get an all even curl. You also want to wait 2 weeks is the magic number between perms. Some perms say you can color the next day. I always play it safe, and I do it the old school way where I give the hair time to heal. So sectioning for a perm, it's very important to section appropriately. Every cosmetology student gets really upset because we tell them to do the classical, I think it's like 9 sections. Honestly, I've never sectioned hair that way. Typically you can do design sections. What you want to do is take the perm rod. With these rods a little bit harder, but the section should be no bigger than diameter, and the if you're using traditional perm rods, the section you want to measure it out, section out that way, clip it up, and that's you're going to section perm. Because if you take the hair and you try to, you know, overdo it, you can actually get a bad result that way because it will cause the curl not to be as uniform. So you want to section the hair in panels, and they will depend on the rod. Base sections are subsections of panels into which the hair is divided for perm wrapping. One rod is normally placed on each base section. The size of each base section is determined by the length and width of the rod used. So know that base placement is the position of the rod in relation to its base section. Base placement is determined by the angle at which the hair is wrapped. Rods can be wrapped on base, half base, or off base. For on base placement, the hair is wrapped at 45-degree angle, beyond perpendicular to its base section. So typically with perms, I'm going to be real frank with you, you're not going to use an on base placement, because what's going to happen is if you do it on base, you're going to put so much tension on the hair that it could either snap the hair, even if you use little picks to help the band stay up. With this on base, you're going to get an increase in volume, but know that the volume is going to be lost immediately as soon as the hair starts to grow out. And you can cause a tension mark from the band on the hair, create a permanent band mark. You can also snap the hair because it's so tough. So what you're doing with an on-base placement is you're over-directing and you're gonna get it to go on base. Typically what we are gonna do is 99% of the perms we're gonna wrap on a half off-base placement, because you're able to go like this with the rod and move it and check underneath, what they call rocking on the rod. The hair is wrapped at a 90-degree angle. That will put it at a half base placement. So where it goes, if you pull up a strand of hair, think of like this, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. That's what that's gonna be. It minimizes tension on the hair. And off-base placement refers to wrapping the hair at a 45-degree angle below the centimeter, so the rod is positioned completely off the base. Typically you're not gonna do this. This is used in the stacking perm when you are gonna stack it, and I've never done one of those, but you'll take a stick too, just to make sure everything is held high up in the air so you can put the solution on. It gives a really cool design to the hair. Your My Lady supplement for the perm chapter, Color and Chemicals Texture Services, has this design in there. Off-base placements create the least amount of volume and result in a curl pattern that begins farther away from the scalp. So know that base direction, that refers to the angle at which the rod is positioned on the head, and we have 2 types. We have horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. 3 types. Typically you're going to do horizontal everywhere, but you might do horizontal here and do diagonal here, or I mean not diagonal, vertical here. So doing a diagonal one, you're going to create a really cool texture. I know the pyramid perm works in a vertical, but it's positioned in an almost diagonal way around the head. So know that base direction also refers to the direction of which the hair is wrapped. Although directional wraps can be wrapped backward, forward, or side to side, it's important to remember when wrapping the natural direction of the hair. If you go against the hair's natural growth pattern, you're going to create some stress. So typically I know that these 2 rods here are wrapped under as opposed to over, because then you're going against the growth. If you're working with a cowlick or whirl, you don't want to go against that or you'll snap the hair. So when you're working vertically, that will mean the rods are like this. When you're working horizontally, they're like this, and if they're diagonal, they're going like that. So always go in the direction of the hair, don't go against it. There are different methods of wrapping. There is the crokinole wrap, which crokinole means from ends to scalp. And a crokinole perm is will have overlapping concentric layers. Because the hair is wrapped perpendicular to the length of the rod, each new layer of hair is wrapped on top of the previous layer, increasing the size of the curl with each new overlapping layer. This produces a tighter curl at the ends and a larger curl at the scalp. Longer, thicker hair increases this effect, so you might have to take a smaller section. To an extent, your rods will also matter. If you're using a very large rod and you're wrapping crokinole, you might just get volume as opposed to what they're saying there. In a spiral wrap, the hair is wrapped at an angle other than perpendicular to the length of the rod, which causes the hair to spiral along the length of the rod, like the stripes of a candy cane. You can spiral wrap on these and then bend them. Know that when you're spiral wrapping, it will create more of like a gentler wave. It creates a really different curl. This wrapping technique causes the size of the diameter of the curl to remain consistent along the entire length of the strand, producing a uniform curl from scalp to ends, so everything is even. With a crokinole perm, it might be a little tapered depending on the rod size, and it might produce a very vintage look if you're using a very strong solution and a small rod. No, for extra long hair, you might need to use the double rod wrap, which is also called the piggyback wrap, in which the hair is wrapped on one rod from the scalp to midway down the hair shaft, and another rod is used to wrap the remaining hair strand in the same direction. This allows for better penetration of the processing solution and for a tighter curl near the scalp than the conventional crokinole technique. Know that there's a huge chemistry to permanent waving. Alkaline permanent waving solutions soften and swell the hair, and they open the cuticle, permitting the solution to penetrate in the cortex. They give you a little example of how much swelling you'll get in the cuticle, which I think is pretty cool. They give you a pH of 9.4 for 5 minutes, and they'll show you the hair strand that's been saturated with an acid balance solution at 7.5 for 5 minutes. The difference is that the pH of 9.4 is like this, and the pH of 7.5 is like this. So know that the swelling is important because that will determine how much damage you're getting or what perm you're choosing. Know that perms work on reduction. So what you're doing is you're using a reducing agent to go in the hair, break those bonds, and then you're gonna rinse that solution out of the hair, make sure it's all nice and clean, and you're gonna reform the bonds by using a neutralizer or even just time. The old school way of perming hair is you actually send the client home wearing rods in their hair, and they'd keep the rods in their hair, let it air dry, and just by neutralizing but from the air, everything would reform without peroxide. So what happened is you come back in the salon, take the rods out and style their hair. We don't do that anymore. I know some places use powered oxygen to dry the hair, and it produces a better result because you're letting the hair breathe a little bit. Typically, with the reduction, in a proper perm, you're breaking at least 50% of the bonds and then reforming what's left. If you break over that, you're actually creating hair relaxing, or what's called thio-relaxing. It's gonna cause the hair to go straight. So know that the chemical process of permanent waving involves this. A disulfide bond joins the sulfur atoms into adjacent polypeptide chains. Permanent wave solution breaks disulfide bonds by adding a hydrogen atom to one of its sulfur atoms. The sulfur atoms attached to the hydrogen from the permanent waving solution breaks their attachment to each other. Once the disulfide bond is broken, polypeptide chains can form into new curled shapes. Reduction breaks disulfide bonds, and oxidation reforms them. Know that all permanent wave solutions contain a reducing agent. Your reducing agent typically is going to be a thio. Typically, thio is used in all solutions, a majority unless thio-free. So know that it contains a thiol, which is a particular group of compounds along with carboxylic acid. Thioglycolic acid is a colorless liquid with a strong and pleasant odor. It usually smells like rotten eggs. It is most commonly used reducing agent in permanent waves. The strength of the permanent waving solution is determined by the concentration of thio. Stronger perms have a bigger concentration, and gentler perms have a lesser concentration. So know that with a stronger perm, you're going to have a higher concentration, so the perm will work quicker. Know that it will break more bonds, so on hair that's porous, it'll work very quick, and you might end up with too many bonds being broken. Know that acids don't swell the hair nor penetrate in the cortex. It's important to make sure you add an alkalizing agent. So if you just take thioglycolic acid alone and you just spray it on the hair, it's not going to do much because it's also an acid. It's not going to break through our hair, which is also acidic. So we have to make it a little alkaline, and we add ammonium to it. When we add ammonia to thioglycolic acid, we produce a brand new chemical called ATG, which is ammonium thioglycolate. This is an alkaline, and the active ingredient is a reducing agent. The ammonia will be able to swell we'll be able to open that cuticle, swell it up, allow the thioglycolic acid to go in there and do its job. So with this procedure, you're marrying the ammonia to the thio. Also know that with perming, there is what I call a business relationship, right? You're gonna let the ammonium thio go to do its work, you're gonna wash it out, and you're gonna put peroxide on to neutralize it. You do not ever wanna mix peroxide and thio, otherwise you're gonna get an exothermic reaction, and it will create heat. Your exothermic perm works in that way. They use an activator or a thermalizer. Here's a fun thing I learned. All that thermalizer is peroxide. The same stuff you use when you color hair, because you use peroxide. You'll take that peroxide, put it in, it creates a warming reaction, and that makes your exothermic perm, and a self-heating perm. Typically, you don't want an exothermic reaction on the hair if you're not planning on it, because what's going to happen is the heat can actually cause more damage. It can cause frizzing and breaking. So that's why you always want to make sure all that reducing agent is washed out of the hair. So the degree of alkalinity, pH, is a second factor in the overall strength of waving solution. Coarse hair with a strong resistant cuticle layer needs additional swelling and penetration that is provided by a more alkaline solution. So typically, the alkaline cold wave is as strong as it gets, but also know that your exothermic wave may work a little bit stronger because you're adding heat, and heat opens things. So when you have that addition with heat, in addition to having the cap on, you're able to, it might work a lot better on very resistant hair. So always make sure you're doing test curls if you're not sure which solution to use. If the hair is virgin and very resistant, try the exothermic wave, process it a little bit longer, and keep checking until you're getting to where you need to go. So there is a huge variety of perms on the market. I will tell you that it is very confusing because sometimes you'll have a thiophene perm, but the thiophene perm can also be a true acid wave. So know that the categories may overlap a little bit. Typically, majority of the perms that we're going to use are acid balance perms. So this chart is a little outdated. Low pH waves, I've yet to find one that uses their chemistry. I've been looking everywhere, so if you know a true low pH wave, comment down below with the brand and I'll check it out, because every student has the same question. At Innovate Academy, we use the Redken perms, and they don't have a thio-free version, but they come in acid balance, acid, and alkaline. So I'm gonna actually break here. I'll let you take your 5-minute break a minute early. We're gonna be going into my favorite part, which is the types of perms, because there are so many out there, and I'll give you my own professional opinion on them. Also know that I've done a supplement to this previously, where a few years ago I went over Endpapers, types of rods, and the types of chemicals that we use. So be sure to check them out, and when we come back, we'll talk about the types of perms.